This video is brought to you by Audible.com. Get 2 free audiobooks with a 30-day free trial. Link in the description below. Today, we're going to talk about an action RPG where a hero with attachments to a royal family runs around with a variety of breakable weapons and eats food to regain health. It's a game where the same few enemies are used over and over, with each enemy color denoting their difficulty level. It's a game with giant oversized bosses to fight and heart containers to upgrade the main character's hit points. That game is Beyond Oasis, a surprise that was surely spoiled by the thumbnail and the title. Back in 1995, I was 13 years old. Our family had a Super Nintendo, and we played a lot of Final Fantasy and Dragon Warrior games. Dragon Quest if you're nasty, or Japanese. I had owned the original Legend of Zelda for NES years before in 1986 or 87. However, I had yet to experience the Super Nintendo's A Link to the Past, despite it being released in the United States 3 years earlier in 1991. It wasn't exactly the sort of game that was easily found in the used game bins and flea markets where we bought most of our games, and finding it available at a rental store, at least at the time, was somewhat of a minor miracle that I never got to experience. So one night I ended up spending the night at my cousin's house, and she had a Sega Genesis, or more accurately, her mom did. My cousin also had a Super Nintendo, because of its obvious superiority. My aunt was playing Beyond Oasis. She was at this part exactly, although I have to admit it looked totally different in my memory. But I sat up all night playing it for myself, and in the morning, impressed that I had passed her progress, she let me take the whole console back to my house so that I could finish the game. I came straight home, unplugged my trusty SNES, hooked up the Sega Genesis via an awful RF adapter to my wooden floor model television, and yes, I am floor model television years old, and before lunch I had completed the game. I had beaten games before this. The first game I ever beat was Super Mario Bros. For the NES, despite the fact that it took me more than 3 hours to beat it again while live streaming on this very channel. Beyond Oasis, however, was the first game that I ever completed. Beyond Oasis was created by Ancient Corp, a video game developer founded in 1990 by game music composer Yuzo Koshiro. You may know Yuzo from his work on classics like Streets of Rage, Actraiser, and the 8-bit version of Sonic the Hedgehog. Yuzo himself did the soundtrack for Beyond Oasis, and it does not disappoint. The 5th game to be developed at Ancient, Beyond Oasis was first released in Japan in December of 1994 and was then called the Story of Thor, a Successor of Light, despite the fact that the hero does not use hammers at all, and he's a prince, not a god. Lightning isn't even one of his powers. The name remained unchanged in its March 1995 European release, but in its North American release just 15 days later, the name was changed along with the main character, who became Prince Ali. Prince Ali, fabulous he, Ali of blah blah. Sorry. The story and much of the gameplay is focused on spirits that can be summoned using a gold armlet. Yet despite this defining gameplay mechanic, the similarities to the Legend of Zelda series cannot be ignored. Even as a kid in 1994 who had yet to even lay eyes on A Link to the Past, I knew that this was a Zelda clone. However, I don't count it against it. If you're going to be a Zelda clone, then be the best damn Zelda clone that you can be. And that's what Beyond Oasis does. That's not to say that the game does everything perfectly. The jumping mechanic is clunky and you have to double tap the directional pad in the direction you want to go in order to run. This makes precise platforming and running jumps extremely difficult to get the hang of, which wouldn't be so bad if the game didn't require you to master these broken mechanics in order to progress. I will say this, however, once you get the hang of it, it feels really good to pull off. Check out this clip. I could wait for these platforms to line up and I'd only need to make one jump per platform. Sounds easy, and it is once you get used to it. But all the falls you'll suffer while learning will have you squeezing your controller in anger. A running jump, however, can get me twice as far, allowing me to jump to one platform and then to the other side. The button inputs to pull this off, however, are insane. These platforms are not a good fit for this game's mechanics, but if you do it the slow way and you're very careful, it's honestly not that hard. However, there are places where executing a run and jump are mandatory to progress, and those places are not easy. In fact, they're the only odd difficulty spikes in the entire game. And don't get me started on this boss who can only be accessed via tiny floating platforms. I had to redo this entire dungeon because of that asshole, and I know he's an because the game says his name is Grand Wizard, and no one who calls themselves Grand Wizard is anything but an asshole. The other mechanics are fine. Perhaps the spirits themselves could have used a bit more polish. You summon them by firing your armlet at something, water or fire for example, and they have attacks and power-ups that range from useless to outright overpowered. Interestingly, the spirit Shade, summoned by shooting Ali's own reflection, has a move that functions exactly like Link's hookshot, grabbing faraway items and bridging gaps. The story is on par with most Zelda games, which is to say that it's there, but in the end, it's a simple run-of-the-mill hero's journey type story, and that's okay. The puzzles start out extremely simple. Move that rock to hold down the switch to progress, for example, but they get more and more complex as you uncover new spirits and abilities. Interestingly, the spirits fill the roles of companion, party member, puzzle solution, and key. Ifrit is a fire spirit summoned by shooting, you guessed it, fire. He can use Flame Breath, a fireball attack, and explode to kill multiple enemies using an attack called Melt Bomber. He can also melt ice, blocking your path to allow you to progress, although to draw another comparison to Breath of the Wild, you can also use bombs, fire arrows, torches, and campfires to clear the path, or even create your own fire by whatever means and use it to call Ifrit. Dido is a water spirit you can call upon by shooting any source of water. She draws comparisons to the Tinkerbell-inspired companion Navi from Zelda, but Dido doesn't talk, so that's an improvement. She can stun enemies using a water projectile called Magic Bubble, heal Ali as long as he has SP, spell power, I assume, it's a magic meter, and finally, she can attack many enemies at once using a whirlpool attack called Magic Storm. Shade, as previously mentioned, is called forth by shooting your own reflection. He has only two abilities, one of which we've already discussed. The hookshot type ability is called Dark Claw, definitely the name of a band somewhere, and Doppelganger, a move allowing Prince Ali to create a clone of himself to hold down switches and locate warp points. Shade also takes damage on Ali's behalf, as long as you still have SP left. And last, and also least, we have Bow. Bow is a plant summoned by shooting not any plant, but this specific plant. His bite attack can damage enemies, but is mostly used to break open locked gates. He can also move underground, allowing you to move him to wherever you need him to be, and his poison pollen attack stuns any enemies nearby and slows everything down. My biggest gripe with the spirits is that Bo is last, not exactly going out on a high note there. Because each spirit is called forth by shooting a particular object, as you gain each one, you immediately remember places that you've seen while exploring, where you know that they can be used to access an area that was previously off limits. This is most pronounced with Bo, since a tiny plant next to a locked gate is hard to forget. When I first acquired the water spirit, I returned to one of them and attempted to water the plant and was a tad confused when it didn't work. All said, Beyond Oasis is a great little hack-and-slash action RPG, and now with 2020 hindsight, it's easy to see why several of the mechanics it used to differentiate itself from Zelda eventually ended up in Zelda itself, like the use of food to restore health or breakable weapons. Beyond Oasis debuted to mixed reviews. Game Informer and Electronic Gaming Monthly both gave it positive scores. Generation was particularly harsh. They called the action poor, the story uninspired, and referred to both as equally average. Bafflingly, they also implied that action RPGs were a bad idea in general, and yet still claimed the game was a mirage of a Zelda game. Admittedly, the larger action RPG genre had yet to really form at the time, but it makes me wonder what they thought of A Link to the Past. If this video does well, maybe we'll find out. GamePro played the Gatekeeper card and said that it was not for hardcore RPGers, suggesting that it was only for beginners. Truth is that Beyond Oasis is an overly easy game, not counting the difficulty caused by its somewhat unpolished jump-and-run mechanics. Its story is by the numbers, and its world is tiny when compared to A Link to the Past. But you know what? It holds up. Here's what counts. When I first played this game, I didn't put it down until it was finished. Now, replaying it decades later, I still didn't put it down until it was finished. Maybe it did take a lot from Zelda, but if no one had copied Rogue, then we'd have no roguelike games. If Castlevania hadn't copied Metroid, we wouldn't have all of the wonderful Metroidvania games that make me throw my controller. This is how a game becomes a genre, and the developers at Ancient saw that potential in Zelda. They could have done their take on the Zelda series and called it a day, but they added new mechanics and tried to change and improve the formula. Some of those changes worked. Hey, I can jump! And some of them did not. Oh no, I have to jump. But when I ask myself, will I play this game again? The answer is a resounding yes. So, for those of you that may want to play this game without help, skip ahead to the timecode on screen because I'm about to tell you the things I wish I knew before playing Beyond Oasis in a very fast lightning round. At the start of the game, open this chest in Ollie's teacher's home right after your first fight, and you'll be rewarded with some delicious cheese that will heal 1/4 of your hit points. Simply leave and re-enter the house over and over to stock up on this yummy healing cheese, and your first quest will be a breeze. Always keep in mind that you can return to previously completed areas, including dungeons, and many of those chests will return, including some that contain weapons. As a matter of fact, there's even one dungeon that you reach by a boat, and I thought it would be inaccessible for sure. However, after jumping off of a ledge later in the game, I found myself back there again, and to my surprise, even the gems had respawned, and there's only a limited number of them in the game. They upgrade your spirits and add 50 to your max SP, so never be afraid to explore. Once you get to the castle, you'll find 3 books hidden in the back. These amount to a tutorial on how to control Prince Ali, and they're honestly pretty incomplete. Check out Ali's complete list of moves on screen right now, and look in the description below for a link to this exact page on RPGclassics.com. I mentioned earlier that you can call Ifrit by shooting any kind of fire, even fire you created. However, this isn't the only part of Ali's world that has similar physics to Breath of the Wild. Enemies, campfires, and torches can all catch on fire. Shade can be summoned by shooting your armlet at the shiny armor worn by enemies, and moving water has momentum that can vary depending on how fast it's running. Just like more modern games, these mechanics all work together, allowing you to solve puzzles in ways that the developers didn't anticipate. Infinite weapons do exist in the game. A funny story, I looked up an IGN guide on what to do when I was trapped in a certain room. The guide said, "Ha ha ha, I'll never tell. Weird, right? Well, apparently this attitude extends to the infinite weapons as well. The guide says, quote, everyone who has found them has come down with a bad case of amnesia, end quote. Well, as it turns out, not everyone. Check the description for yet another link to RPGclassics.com and their guide to finding infinite weapons in Beyond Oasis, including one that I never would have found on my own since it requires you to complete an area without getting any chests, and that's not how completing games works. Fortunately, you can return to the area and clear out the chests afterwards. If you're trying to get the best class possible at the end of the game, then please keep in mind that every heart container you pick up will lower your class. However, it will also increase your hit points and level, making the game easier. They drop randomly, but I did find a way to manipulate the system. Upon entering a new dungeon, fight until a heart drops and then get killed. You'll respawn at the start of the dungeon and the heart will drop from the same enemy every time. The random drops seem to be set until you beat or leave the dungeon. Since rank increases are not lost when you die, you can gain as many as you like before moving on. Ifrit calls are pretty much useless. Fire is everywhere and you'll have lots of bombs. Instead, shoot your armlet at the Ifrit call item and the light ball will transform it into an Omega Sword. At least until you get the Infinite Omega Sword, the closest thing Beyond Oasis has to the Master Sword. And don't forget to save often. And why shouldn't you? The sound effect is so satisfying. Play it again. In my playthrough of Beyond Oasis, there were 7 hours, 36 minutes, and 22 seconds of in-game time, more than 12 hours of total real-world time, 65 ranks gained, 1,252 enemies killed, 22 deaths, and countless times that I fell off these damn platforms. Why is this so hard?